differences of opinion within each party are natural.
I will actually fill it out for them.
Impressive background.
Receiving pension and the
to the sacrifices of thousands of
Hello, Trumbull. Welcome to Ask the First Selectman. I'm your host for the day, Steve Coulter. I'm the editor of the Trumbull Times. With me in studio here at Trumbull High School is First Selectman Timothy Herbst.
Thank you.
How are you doing this morning, Tim?
Doing great, Steve. Thanks for having me.
And we're going to get into some questions. I think the first topic on everybody's mind is the budget.
Yes.
It's coming up this year. Talk a little bit about what you've got planned ahead for everybody in town, where we are in the process right now, and where we're going over the next month into February.
Well, where we are right now is the Board of Education has adopted a budget that they have now forwarded to my office that I will consider when I formulate the total town budget, which I will have to deliver to the Board of Finance by no later than February 10th. Where we are in the process right now is that I am meeting with, on a regular basis, daily basis, all town department heads to go through their budgets. And I'm also working with our Director of Labor Relations, Jim Hazelkamp, and the Finance Director, Maria Pires, on an early retirement incentive plan that we're offering to two unions here in the town of Trumbull, which will arguably impact the budget. If somebody elects to retire, we will look at possible consolidations and reductions to further reduce the employee headcount. One of the things I'm most proud of is that we've done a 10-year analysis, and our employee headcount is less than it was in 2004. So we're at a 12-year low. So in this budget, what I am trying to accomplish is to make government smaller and smarter to the best extent possible without compromising town services, to give Chief Lombardo and the Trumbull Police Department the resources they require, to fully fund our pension obligations, to pay down our debt, and perhaps most importantly, to make sure we continue to have a superb public school system. So one of the things that I will be looking at in this budget process is how we can reduce non-education related costs without impacting the delivery of public education. One of the things that we are working around the clock on is possible changes to our health care plan. The state of Connecticut is allowing local municipalities to go into their health care plan. We've determined that the health care plan appears to be better than what we're offering our employees now, and we think we're going to save anywhere from $1.5 to $2.5 million if the town and the Board of Education can do this.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Taxpayers like to hear those words, right?
Taxpayers like to hear that. You know, Fairfield just proposed this. Dr. Titles, superintendent in Fairfield, just proposed their Board of Education with the town going into this plan. Estimated savings are at about $4 million. So if we can reduce our energy costs, which Mark Deming, our BOE facilities director, has done a tremendous job.
We've got a story coming up next week in the Trumbull Times about that. So.
Tremendous job he's done in a little over a year on the job. If we can reduce our energy costs and if we can reduce our health care costs, that means that we're not only making taxpayers happy, but we're making it easier from a budgetary standpoint to invest in the things that matter to parents when we're delivering a public education here in the town of Trumbull. So these are the kinds of things that I'm hopeful when I meet with the PTA on February 2nd that I can get them to get behind. Because if we can find efficiencies and cost reductions in these non-education related areas,
healthcare and energy in
particular.
particular.
Energy, a lot of the big drivers. That's going to help us to focus on the things that matter. So to make the investments in additional AP course offerings at the high school, to make investments in additional SAT training, to make investments in integration specialists. Quite frankly, I think that's where we all should be focused. It's not a question of asking for more as much as it is a question of identifying those efficiencies in those non-education related areas, working together, and then focusing on the things that matter.
And the Board of Education met last Tuesday. They
Yes.
came up with a 2.7% budget increase, which was actually a decrease of $377,000 from the superintendent's proposed budget back in December. Mm-hmm. What are some of your thoughts on the Board of Education's actions last week, and is it your intention to add or decrease further to the Board of Ed's budget?
Well, here's what I can tell you. it's hard for me to believe I'm about to say this, but as I prepare my 7th budget, one thing that I've learned about the budget process is it's not so much where you start as where you finish.
Sure.
And there's a lot of moving parts in a budget process.
It doesn't look the same as in December as it comes out in March. It's like going through a machine.
You know, I'm already getting the emails that the sky is falling. The sky is not falling. The sky is not falling. There's a lot of steps left in this process. There's a lot more quarters to play before we hit the end zone. And
we're not even at halftime yet.
We're not even at halftime. And what I just told you about the insurance, now arguably, if we can identify total savings of anywhere from $1.5 to $2.5 million in insurance, that basically addresses that $377,000 question that's just been raised.
So I can go right back in.
Well, it could go back in. It could, or the Board of Finance or the Council could determine maybe some of it, not all of it, or none of it.
Yeah, some could go to the cops, some could go public safety.
Well, there are a lot of moving parts in this budget, and you know, I can recall at least 4 instances, looking back on my tenure, where I have proposed a number that was not supported by the educational lobby. They thought that it would have a detrimental impact on public education. And by the time we got to the town council adopting the budget and the Board of Education then taking that number and working with it, it didn't compromise public education. The sky was not falling. So everyone needs to understand this is a very, very long process. There are a lot of moving parts. We're going to try to find savings in those non-education areas that I mentioned, which quite frankly everyone should support. People that are pro-education and advocate for our schools, seniors that are on fixed incomes and are concerned about their property taxes, we should all be supporting this. We should all be on board. We should all be embracing what Mark Deming is doing. We should all be embracing what Jim Hazelkamp is doing to reduce these big drivers in the budgets.
Now, I'm sure you're tired of talking about the budget, so let's move on to another question.
I love talking about the budget, but that's okay.
All right, one more actually, I should say. What are some of the areas you're focused on going into your presentation to the Board of Finance February 10th?
You heard me mention the early retirement incentive program.
Right.
We will know by February 3rd what employees have elected to take that. Once I have that information, within that 7-day window between February 3rd and the 10th, what you're going to see in this budget is a lot of reorganizations of town departments intended to enhance efficiency, reduce cost, reduce the overall town employee headcount. You know, in this campaign, you know, a lot of people complained about taxes, complained about spending, but wanted to spend more in other areas. And
one of them being education.
One of them being education. And let me tell you something. When you're the first selectman, you can't be a one-trick pony. You have to focus on everything. You have to focus on pensions, making sure they're fully funded, your debt service, your town government, your police department, very important.
You got capital projects
Capital projects, schools. So in this budget, you're going to see a lot of additional reorganizations, consolidations, and reductions on the town side. What you will see is phase 2 of the Parks and Recreation reorganization. Now that Mr. McCarthy is on board, and now that we have a completed audit from the Matrix Group detailing what they believe to be the inefficiencies in the department, in my budget, I will propose implementing many of the recommendations that were contained in that audit to improve efficiency, to improve customer service, to enhance online capability, to reduce the need for perhaps personnel to carry on the functions of what can be done online. You'll be seeing a lot of that. You will see a renewed focus on senior and social services. I talked about this in the last Ask the First Selectman. We have a population, a senior population, that is growing at a
growing every year,
escalated rate. By 2019, 25% of the town of Trumbull will be over the age of 65. I just spoke to the director of the Southwest Center on Aging yesterday. She said when you look at our senior population as it relates to all of Fairfield County, we have some of the highest ratios of people over the age of 65.
Right here in Trumbull.
Yes, so that's why I am talking about a new senior center. That's why I am talking about senior tax relief and providing additional senior and social services to a growing population. Right now, about 5,000 residents are over the age of 65.
And it's going to balloon up to what, 8,000?
And it's going to balloon up. So in this budget, you're going to see a renewed focus on senior and social services. You're going to see phase 2 of the Parks and Recreation reorganization. You are going to see an emphasis on school resource officers in the police budget. Chief Lombardo and I feel very strongly about this. When Chief Lombardo took office a year ago, he found that Trumbull did not have a school resource officer program, one of a handful of communities statewide that don't have them, and one of a handful in Fairfield County. So when he came to me, I said, we're going to make this happen. School resource officers are important. They're important to the educational process, they're important to protecting kids, and they're also important in identifying problems before they in fact materialize. So I'm going to make the commitment to fund 3 school resource officers in this budget, 1 at the high school and 1 at each elementary school, because I feel very strongly about it.
You mean the middle schools?
Both middle schools,
Yep.
I'm sorry. I feel very strongly about it, and I'm very committed to it.
And we've got another question coming up. Other CT towns have a youth commission whose purpose is to focus on youth outside of school-related activities. What are your thoughts about creating a commission to fill this need? Given the heroin crisis, could a youth commission provide support outside of the school system?
Well, I can tell you that I'm glad that question was raised, because as part of this reorganization in the Parks and Recreation Department, I've talked to Stuart McCarthy, our director, and I've talked about how I would like staff to be dedicated to additional youth programming to address a lot of the concerns that were raised in the premise of that question. But to get to your point about the drug problem, that is not only a Trumbull problem, it's a Connecticut problem, it's a national problem. Opiates, heroin. We just had a
forum,
a forum this week, Monday night, with our state legislators. It's going to take more than a youth commission to solve this problem. That's why I created the first Selectman's Drug Prevention Task Force, because, you know, I said the other night, 20 years ago, when Bill Clinton was our president, I can recall the debate about whether it takes a village or whether it takes a family to raise a child. And I can tell you 20 years later, it takes a community to deal with a problem like this. It takes your teachers, your administrators, your school officials. It takes your police. It takes law enforcement. It takes doctors. You know, there are a lot of doctors that have prescription power that perhaps are...
They're kind of the root of the problem, aren't they?
Perhaps some doctors, not all, are over-prescribing. So we need to bring doctors into this conversation. We need to bring our legislators into this conversation to provide local municipalities.
And a lot of them were on hand at the forum on Monday night.
Absolutely. And I talked very extensively about the school resource officer program. If we have a drug problem in our schools, here's why the school resource officer is critical. The school resource officer forges relationships not only with our educators, but with our kids. And a school resource officer has the training and the background to work with school officials in identifying potential problems, perhaps identifying those that are dealing these substances, but also in providing education. They'll be teaching courses. So we need to allow these school resource officers to get into our schools and teach about the dangers of drugs, of gateway drugs, and what they might lead to down the road. And the education, Steve, cannot start in the high school. Can't start there.
It needs to start earlier.
That's why I have funded I will fund 2 resource officers in the middle schools. And we also need to really get focused on drug education at the elementary level. When we think a child is developmentally ready to understand the consequence of using drugs, that's when we as a community need to start the educational process of the dangers. And you know what? That's why we have taken our 2 canine units and made those 2 canines capable of detecting drugs. I've told Dr. Chaffee that I want to utilize our canine unit. I want to use our school resource officers. I want to track down those that are dealing these substances to our kids and bring them to justice and hold them accountable. But we also have to focus on preventative measures like education, like school resource officers, like collaboration with our teachers and administrators. That is the only way you're going to deal with this problem. It has to be holistic, and everyone has to come to the table to deal with it.
Yeah, it's got to come from the ground up to
Absolutely.
nip it before it becomes really problematic. We're going to go on to our next question. I think this one's going to have to deal with some politics, unfortunately. What happened with the vacant District 2 council seat? How did the seat become available, and why was Richard Kasich chosen over Cindy Penkoff. Cindy received the most votes, or the next highest vote total in the district in November. What exactly happened, and what did this selection process involve?
Okay. Well, let me start out with the vacancy before I talk about the politics.
Sure.
And in my line of work, unfortunately, I talk about politics a lot. So the vacancy occurred, tragically, Robert McGowan, who was elected to the District 2 council seat, was charged with vehicular manslaughter in New Jersey. I was not aware of that when he was nominated. He was a member of the Economic Development Commission. Quite frankly, nobody was aware of it. When I became aware of it, I asked for him to resign and to step down.
This was in November.
This
too,
was
for
in
those who
November.
have been following.
For the good of the town, I asked him to step down, and he tendered his resignation. Because this was uncharted territory, the charter calls for, when there is a vacancy in the council, the caucus elects the successor. The Republican caucus of 14 remaining at that point, there are 15 Republicans and 6 Democrats on the council. The 14 remaining had to make that decision. They chose Mr. Kassak, eminently qualified, longtime Trumbull resident. He is a city attorney for the city of Bridgeport, deals with their police department, understands municipal government, and the caucus made a decision that they wanted to go a different route. I think everybody in the caucus respects Mrs. Penkoff's service to the community, but they decided that they wanted to go in a different direction, and ultimately it was their decision, and I respect their decision.
And when you say the caucus, it's the 15 Republican members of the
The
town.
14 remaining
14,
to
yeah.
elect the 15th.
Exactly. And then did you feel that the town charter was violated at all? Or I know we spoke about it, but for those who
Absolutely
haven't-
not, because what we did was we sought guidance from the town attorneys before the council proceeded with the action that they took. And I just think it's town attorneys who should be interpreting
Looking
the
at
town
that
charter,
kind of stuff,
people that
right.
are trained to do that. And they made a determination, and Chairman Massaro and the caucus acted upon it.
That's all they can do, right?
Correct.
We got another question coming up. The Economic Community Development Director is leaving Trumbull. With a new director, will the town maintain the business practice of concierge service?
Absolutely. Our former Economic Development Director, Jamie Broad, has taken a position
In
in
Hartford.
Hartford, which
Congratulations
is,
to her.
congratulations
Yeah.
to her. It's closer to her family, and it's something that she feels very passionate about. We both went to Trinity, which is in Hartford, and she's very passionate about Hartford, and I wish her well. I can tell you that we will absolutely maintain that concierge level of service in our Economic and Community Development Department and all of our permitting departments. When I became the first selectman, I reorganized that department, and I said, you know what? I want all of our permitting agencies to be on the same page: building, fire, health, planning and zoning, engineering. So now there's an organizational chart that allows all permitting agencies to report to this position. One of the things that I'm going to do in retooling the job description, which we have posted for the position and we are receiving applications, I have added a grant writing function to this position, because I believe having somebody with experience
Yeah,
in
to get some state
applying
money.
for and receiving grants is important, because our taxpayers are pretty clear that they don't like tax increases, but we need money to do things to move the town forward. So I want to have an economic development director who is it's called Economic and Community Development Director, because applying for grants is very much about community development. It's about developing priorities, determining what your needs are, and pursuing all avenues to obtain the funding that you will require to meet those goals and objectives. So I'm very excited about some of the applications we've received thus far. I'm very excited that people want to come work in Trumbull and for Trumbull. I think it's a testament to the staff that we've built up here in the town and the people that we've hired to help move the town forward. And I think that concierge level of service is reflected when you drive around town. I get excited every time I drive through the Long Hill Green and I see the rehabilitation of the
Yeah, it's
former
coming along pretty nicely.
Luigi's property.
I was just
And-
over at Madison yesterday, actually, doing an interview with the Upper Crust Bakery.
Oh, Madison Village.
Yeah.
I mean, we're opening businesses in our town. We're growing our economy. We're growing our grand list every single year. we're going to have substantial grand list growth that will be reported in the budget that I will present on February 10th. And we've grown our economy every year despite going through the Great Recession and despite the economic challenges that we face as a state here in Connecticut. We're growing our economy every single year. We've added 800 jobs to Trumbull's economy over the course of the last 6 years. I think we're on the horizon to see a beautiful expansion of Westfield Trumbull, and additional investment in Long Hill Green, additional restaurants, additional merchants, additional small business.
A good economy makes for a good town, isn't that right?
Absolutely.
I think we've got another economic question. Are there any large economic projects being developed in town right now? If so, kind of please describe them to the audience.
I think the phase 2 of the mall renovation will be a big project in 2016. I think you will see the Planning and Zoning Commission work over the course of the next year to upzone certain properties for redevelopment. I think Madison Village and the Long Hill Green gave us assurance that what we wanted to do could be done. Now that we've actually seen it, we've experienced it.
Yeah, residents can go see it with their own eyes.
Residents can see with their own eyes.
There.
So people know we're not giving away the store or compromising the town's character. So I envision a lot of similar upzoning and revitalization of current properties that will occur this year on the Long Hill Green, in other areas of town where you have some perhaps pre-existing non-conforming uses. On my way over here, I went to personally inspect the demolition, the interior demolition work going on at the Corner Deli, which is expected to open. Which is expected to open this spring, reopen this spring. We're very excited about that. What I've asked our land use and planning department to do is to look at all areas where there are pre-existing non-conforming lots or pre-existing non-conforming uses and determine if there is opportunity to upzone these areas, perhaps to light retail, perhaps to business commercial, where we can plan the town in a responsible way, make sure that the zoning is in conformity with the regulations, and give our residents the options they require. And I think it can be done. This is going to be an exciting year for us on the economic development front, and I'm really excited about it.
And you're juggling this while you're juggling the budget. It's a lot of balls in the air.
Well, that's why I don't sleep very much.
All right, I think we've got a few more. Has the Building Study Committee shifted its priorities with the addition of 2 new members? What are its current goals heading into 2016?
Current goals are to identify a location. As I indicated in my swearing-in speech, I want the Building Committee to identify a site within the next 60 to 90 days. And then I want to get focused on identifying that site and developing blueprints and a plan to construct a new center. I want that center to be one that is, as I've said to one of the architects who's on the committee, inviting but not intimidating, nice but not grandiose. I want it to be a state-of-the-art facility that allows us to expand our program offerings, that allows us to expand the amount of seniors we are offering opportunity to, that allows for recreational activity in addition to traditional programs, fitness and wellness among them. You know, one of the things that I said at the last session we had here, we have about 5,000 seniors in Trumbull that are over the age of 65, yet we only have about 700 people who are registered to use our center, with almost 30% of those coming from out of town.
Yeah.
I want Trumbull residents to use the Trumbull Senior Center. I want Trumbull seniors to partake in Trumbull senior activities. And that is the charge, in my opinion, for the Senior Citizen Commission, is to find ways to not only work with us collaboratively in constructing a new center, but working to grow programming, expand programming offerings, and increase membership and participation.
And so the first step here in the early months of 2016 is finding that site.
Absolutely.
And then developing the blueprint from there.
Absolutely.
So that's something to look forward to for the audience. I think we've got a few more questions. Is there a limit on the what the administration can spend capital-wise, expense money, without asking residents to vote on a capital expense referendum? If so, what is it?
When I ran for first selectman in 2009, I campaigned on a platform of charter revision, and one of the provisions that I advocated for was that capital projects in excess of $15 million go before the voters by way of a public referendum, because I did not want to face another $73 million capital project or $52 million capital project that quite frankly and candidly divided the community. I think that when you're asking taxpayers to foot that kind of bill, taxpayers should have a say. And I am grateful for the fact that we were successful in championing those charter revision changes. So any capital project over $15 million must go before the voters. But here's why that provision's important. It's important not only because you're allowing voters to vote on big ticket items, it requires the town and the Board of Education to engage in proactive capital planning on an annual and regular basis, so you don't kick the can, and so you're not staring down the barrel of a $73 million price
All of a
tag.
sudden, yeah, it
All of
just
a
comes
sudden.
out of nowhere. And
So what
yeah.
you're seeing now in our capital budgets, in our capital plan, both under Mr. Marsilio's leadership on the town side and on under Mr. Deming's leadership on the Board of Ed side, you are seeing more proactive, robust capital planning on an annual basis. That's not only making our buildings more energy efficient, not only paving roads that have been neglected for far too long, not only making space usage more efficient, but doing it in a way that is fiscally responsible, where our debt service is held to a minimum. In this budget that we're in right now, the debt burden was less than the year before. And that's because we've done capital planning on an annual basis, and we haven't kicked the can. And whoever comes after me needs to keep that mindset, because if we don't, that's when taxpayers are going to pay a lot more than they should.
You got to look at it annually.
Absolutely.
And I think that's all the questions that we have for you. Thank you so much again, Tim, for coming in. This is another edition of Ask the First Selectman. I'm sure you'll be back on soon to answer more questions from the community. If you have any questions, you can email them to TCTV through www.trumbleps.tv, or you can email them. There's a lot of different ways, or you can even send them by mail, the old-fashioned way, email or mail. Thank you again for watching. You can watch on Charter Channel 194, Frontier Channel 99, or you can watch online at any time.
Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tim, and everybody have a great week.